All right. Hello, everyone.
All right. Hello, Mark.
Hello, this is Perf
Shall
Bites
we
Live.
stand and stretch our feet?
I think we should stand up for this one. Don't you think? I have a cup of coffee.
James, are you going to... Do you need a break, James?
This is Perf Bites
Good.
Live from Dynatrace Perform 2018 here in Loosey Goosey, Las Vegas.
Loosey Goosey, Las Vegas. We could do that. We could do Lavender, Las Vegas. to go with the
Lackluster?
Lackluster, Las Vegas. Because I did try a couple of slot machines the other night and had a
Lazy
lackluster
Las
result.
Vegas.
Yes.
Lovely Las Vegas. Liquid Las Vegas.
I don't know
Which
why
to
I'm
some
blanking on
people,
words.
if they drink a lot of L words.
Lunch meat, Las Vegas.
Lunch meat, Las Vegas.
Meatloaf.
Yeah. Meatloaf, meatloaf, meatloaf.
And apps.
Because everyone's here for lunch. We can see if you could see the ocean of people at like the conference room tables. You notice nobody seems bored.
Well, except for that one person over there.
They're working really hard.
Yeah.
Everybody's in conversations. We've had a lot of good traffic at the booth. A lot of people stopping by. Maybe
Yes.
because we tweeted out the picture of James with the Dynatrace UFO that we're giving away.
We're giving away a UFO?
We're giving away a UFO.
And this is a real UFO.
Well, yes, it's real.
Okay.
Because the one that landed in Roswell was fiction.
So they say.
I think so. Yes, I want to believe.
Yes. Good.
But I'm tired, so I don't believe. So that'll be good. So here we are. And
you just had a session.
I just had a session on continuous performance.
Let's talk about your session, Mark.
Continuous performance.
I did not get to make your session. ...
And self-service ... with fully automated feedback loops.
And meatloaf.
So it was good. It was really taking a half-day workshop and compressing it into a 45-minute session.
So what would the highlights of your message be in that?
I think point number one...
Can you take the 40 minutes and make it maybe 3 right now?
Well, I think there's 3 takeaways that you would do, like when I do a submission, the 3 key takeaways. One is that your existing tooling probably already supports doing continuous load testing.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
But you just need to change how you think you should be doing your job as a load tester. So it's going to take change, but one, the tooling is probably already there for you.
So let's pause there for a moment and let's clarify continuous load testing. Do you mean I have an environment, load is always being generated on it, or is it like
on a schedule,
on demand?
unattended? Well, here's the thing. It's funny you asked that, because point number 2 is that you will have to adapt when you do load testing to the fact that there's continuous releases, maybe with continuous integration, The pipeline, the main pipeline, is continuously working. It's just most people right now manually decide what combination of releases they push into the load test environment.
Right.
Then they run a large integrated load test. And this is what I would call facilitated, manually conducted load testing. It's kind of the old school way we used to do it.
Right. You get a release that comes in, you go ahead and fire up your generators and hit go and say, all right, just kicked off a test. I've got 30 minutes to go play some Halo.
Yeah. Now, you and I in an old load testing world imagined that is really a good way to do it.
Right. What's the best we had?
What we might not perceive now is that doing that sort of stage up a bunch of releases that are aligned, then push them into the environment and test them as a unit or as a defined set of app releases, actually is quite costly upstream, because you're sort of maybe putting a pause and you're pooling up a bunch of releases, trying to manually figure out which dependencies need the thing, and the whatever, where actually the development streams now are just continually going forward. Right. And granted, if they do have dependency issues and they're not very smart about coding against dependencies or using the tools to figure those dependencies out, yeah, they're going to have collisions. But you know what your job as a tester is, not just a performance tester? As soon as possible, I want you to see big red errors about the stupid dependency thing that we missed.
Right.
So why would I, if I'm not doing my job of a tester, as I sit there in my lab saying, well, I'm going to wait till you guys get that dependency thing figured out. I'm not going to show any red errors. I'm not going to escalate. I'm not going to make it visible. I'm not going to be part of the display of we're not getting it right, we're not getting it right, we're not getting it right.
Right.
So that's a thinking change where rather than being load testing late in the game, I have to wait till you figure out the releases for me to do my job as a tester. Instead, I'm just going to take whatever you got, put it in the environment, and hit the run button.
Right.
So if the scripts are not maintained, we're going to get lots of errors. We might get some false results too, but hopefully we get lots of errors. If the app is not functionally sound, you're going to get a lot of errors. What's a company really paying me to do as a tester? Run stuff as soon as possible and show if something's screwed up.
Right.
So that principle from a DevOps sort of frequent iterations, frequent feedback, that principle has to come into continuous performance testing versus manually attended, facilitated.
So another interesting thing, I forget who it was we were talking with, Andy and I, on Pure Performance a while back. The idea of the build comes into your environment, right?
Yeah.
You run your tests. Maybe your tests don't cover the new functionality, or maybe some things have changed, so now your test scripts might fail themselves.
Right.
Well, what this team is doing, they happen to be a little bit of a unicorn, I'd say, in load testing, because they are putting in the money to do most of their load testing through browser-driven tests.
Okay.
So if they're going to have, if we talk about virtual users, if they're going to have 1,000 virtual users, there are going to be 1,000 browsers being driven, meaning that from the development stage on, someone has created a browser-driven test for the unit test throughout. So as soon as it comes in their environment, they already have the new test ready to go, and they don't have to wait. They don't have to the risk of those scripts failing.
Yeah.
Again, not everybody could do that, but I just thought that was a fascinating idea because
I will say that
again,
everyone should do that.
Right. It's just a lot more money, right? Because how many tests can you run from a single desktop operating system that are browser-driven?
Well, but this is an esoteric thing about browser-driven type of load tests, which
it's just easier to maintain that one, right? Because someone else is doing that. No one's going to run no one's going to necessarily write a JMeter script.
Yeah,
maybe not.
Yeah,
go
in my world.
Yeah.
I don't have any GUI-based stuff at all. We are simply a large suite of web services. We're an enormous suite of microservices. But my particular little world in credit is a fairly small subset of the greater world. So web service-based stuff, the GUI stuff, that's the easy way to do it. But it's deceptively easy.
Right.
Because usually the people you get to build those kinds of scripts are equally tasked now chasing feature changes. You've ever tried to do like a Selenium script with AngularJS? It's a nightmare.
Okay.
I mean, so the idea of browser-driven GUI, it's still, as much as we might think, that's easier, sure enough, we figured out how to make it super weird and complex and all that. So you're really kind of apples and oranges in terms of pain.
So, and you're saying
I'm not saying
more services that you can test.
Yeah, but I'm not advocating or saying one way or the other. But in continuous performance for the session, it was mostly just describing, can I share, say, a JMeter script, the same JMeter script that I'm running in development for 10 threads? I just take that same JMeter script, feed it different data and different properties, and run it for 10,000 threads.
Right.
And actually, if the upstream in development, if that JMeter script is used and run on check-in for small unit component level performance tests, the developers will be the first ones to see that, the script's out. Yeah, of course. And they know right in their head. For them, it's 5 seconds. Payload change, add 2 fields. There's not this lengthy overhead of I have to communicate in a document to somebody, to another team, then a silo somewhere else. Mm-hmm. They're empowered to change the test script. And, in my world, your test assets need to be stored in the repository with the app. So your test assets being stored and versioned in Git or in Subversion, whatever you're doing. That's a requirement.
Right, and in this kind of situation, this is exactly where the spirit of DevOps comes in, right? Because you should have that person whose job is to do the performance/load testing early on, or at some point, helping guide the developer on, you're going to write a JMeter script that I'm going to use later on. Let me teach you and show you
what
a good performance test is going to look like, so that when the developer writes one, they're just not going to write a simple little dumb script that's going to test their little function. They're going to write it a little bit more downstream with that in mind, because you're bringing the teams together to say, let's serve each other. You teach me, I teach you. You're going to build something that you create here. I'm going to use that same thing later. Let's do it right from the beginning.
Give and ye shall receive.
Yes, exactly.
Right? And this is a challenge for people who often think of our discipline in a silo where other people don't understand what we do, and it's all on us to do everything that we have to do. When you do that shift from silos into pipeline,
right,
suddenly you're helping and facilitating people learn how to do more, better, cool stuff upstream, downstream, and you're part of that flow. And I found JMeter was a good tool to do this. We're researching Locust, but any tool that allows you more modular capability is a good thing, right?
Right.
We're going to let them have a conversation.
Yes.
So anyway, the first thing was,
so
the first thing in continuous performance is your tools probably already work to do this.
Right.
So you need some, but you just need to start thinking of those tools in command line driven, but unattended and recurring unattended tests.
Correct.
So where in development you would on check-in, they would run a JMeter script.
Right.
You don't want to, like if you have a sonar model, you do the first wave and then you do more testing and progressively more testing and feed that data back to the developer, back to the developer.
Yep.
If you think of load testing being on the main pipeline, or what I call the promotional flow,
okay.
If load testing's not going well, you'll block the pipeline. And you're right back to a phase gate or gatekeeping role. Which is all you should be doing is load testing is helping things get promoted faster.
Right.
And so to some extent, there will be some releases that need to go to production that really don't need load testing. They will say, this is such a small change, let's just push it through.
Right. All we're doing is changing the amount of threads.
And hopefully your engineers are mature enough or smart enough, or your ops people are smart enough, yeah, we can make this change and not do load testing. Now, we track that we chose not to.
There's always an assumed risk.
Yeah, there is a risk, but someone can approve and say, yeah, let's just go for it. And
you have to know
if we're moving fast enough in a green-blue deployment, if it turns out we should have done load testing, we flip the feature off and we go back and do the work. So you want to enable that flexible pipeline operation. So what I did, and I actually talked with several companies over the last few years, that what I call an off-the-flow or out-of-the-flow continuous performance pipeline, which means you have, if you draw a straight line on a page, that's your main pipeline for development to ops.
Right.
Then you draw a circle right below that, and that is the continuously running load test 24/7 in the load testing environment.
Right.
So you can have releases that cruise along the pipeline. Some of them are flagged. I don't want to do load testing, just go right on to prod. Some of them will say, I need to do load testing, and it will trigger from the main pipeline, no matter what's happening in the load test environment, push the latest release.
And this is all automated, you're saying. So there's going to be a flag in that release.
Yeah, with Puppet or
there's going to be a flag in that
whatever.
release. So when it comes in, it's just going to, the process is going to...
And your company, your application architecture should have a commitment to zero downtime and green-blue deployment. So I should be able to push that new release with rolling restarts and load balancing or whatever. I should actually have a valid test that says, in the middle of a load test running, I can push a release and not disrupt the flow. So it's actually a good functional
because
test
this will
of
be practicing
zero downtime deployment.
Yes, perfect.
Just like product. I'm like, great. So I get bonus testing out of that situation, which is really, really great. There's some loud people about we ran out of stopwatches.
James ran out of stopwatches.
You can take some koozies. And if...
See, look, you could do this with it, too. I have one on my arm. See, I've made a Wonder Woman cufflink cuff.
Like Wonder Woman?
Yes, exactly. All right, so...
That's great.
The one thing that... So in that process...
So there's the two principles.
Let's get to number 3, and then I'll ask you my other question. So that's the second principle, right? And you said there's a third principle, or no?
The third principle is automated decision-making.
Okay.
Because you're going to have to... with notifications and the results and stuff, if you have sort of a singular pass-fail pipeline criteria, if you have...
You're waiting for Brent to come in and look at the results.
Or, you have this sort of bottleneck thing. How do I... this is a big challenge, right? How do I aggregate all of those results which are nuanced? You know, it's not just green or red. There's yellow,
right?
High risk, low risk, medium risk. There's all different ways we can communicate that back to the pipeline. But usually, even a Jenkins or Bamboo pipeline... you've got to have some predetermined thresholds. And this is why I like in Dynatrace, the QA versions of Dynatrace, even Atmon, where you have the trending piece, the corridor.
Yep.
And so we can start communicating back. If you use Dynatrace, you can clearly either have an alert or not alert, or query an alert. Am I in threshold or out of threshold?
Right,
And that's based on, say, a 30-day look back on how are we doing. So build over build over build, suddenly we've gone out of tolerance. And now that the fact that we're out of tolerance will actually, if it's a high-risk component, maybe it even blocks the pipeline. Or you want to make sure that the results of green, yellow, yellow to red, and you see things in like the financial trading markets. You can sort of say, they have the look-back periods, and you can see the trends.
Yes.
Same kind of thing for performance. You want to look at trending information, so a release manager, if it gets flagged, whoa, we're not going to automatically push this and decide to push. If it's totally green, maybe you decide as a company in your continuous deployment, go ahead and push it right to prod. Mm-hmm. Some companies will never do that. They'll just push to pre-prod, and then the actual push to production is manual decision with a push button.
So that's exactly...
So you have to feed those... The last part is like alerting and notification and sort of some parsing of the results. Now, if I were in a load runner world, use a load runner API. Neotis world, there's some APIs out of their results tool or repository. You can pull that out. Parse that up a little bit, get it back on the main pipeline for a given release.
Right. So that was the second question I was thinking of. You just answered, because as soon as you said automated decision making, I was thinking, well, do you have yes, no, and then maybe where human steps in, and you kind of addressed that right there, right? You're going to have conditions where, yes, we can see this is good, we're going to push it automatically. Right. Yes, we can see this is obviously bad, we're going to break the pipeline right here.
Right.
And then that,
the middle ground.
Machine doesn't know what to do with it.
So
that's where it's going to come into someone like you and the other people, or whoever else is in charge, right? Who's going to come in and say...
Get your chat Slack notification bot put together. Have Davis on your bot world. That'll work nicely. And some way to interact and say, I get it's in the orange. I think we'll be all right. This is actually not that high risk of a X, Y, and Z. And the other transactions look really good. It's just this one weird transaction that no one ever does.
Right.
So that kind of subtlety. Now, there's a couple other weird... things in the continuous operations mode is that self-service was the other part of this. Is, do I have a way to have any engineer, maybe even people who don't even know JMeter,
right,
or don't even know the test tool, to sort of hop in and run a load test?
Okay.
Because I was the only performance engineer, the only load testing guy for quite a while here.
Yes.
And so I needed to give them a way to not have to understand the crazy folder structure of the shell command line SSH session running JMeter. So I used a tool like Rundeck. So I give a little demo of Rundeck on using the GUI features for a job in Rundeck and using those to send the properties and launch JMeter. So they now have sort of a GUI way to see. I think... Octoperf was, you remember Octoperf, James? Octoperf. He's not, James is there. So Octoperf, we've done some stuff with them. They have the same thing. Give us a web-based GUI in order to do JMeter. They do a hell of a lot more for actual scripting of JMeter.
Okay. You should be on now.
That's very strange.
No,
Get
it was
on the
blinking.
mic.
It was getting
It was
on the
blinking.
channel.
Octoperf.
Yeah, I like Octoperf.
Yeah. He likes Octoperf.
Yeah, a lot. Yeah.
Regardless, so here's two things that you can do cool with Rundeck. You can, on demand, fill in the blanks, fill in the properties, hit go, and run your load test.
Right.
You can also have, like any good job scheduling, you have cron schedule capabilities. Now, in the manually facilitated load testing world, you create a scenario. And maybe you have 20 different scripts come together. You run them all at the same time. You're doing like a simulation of production load. Well, that's nothing more than running lots of scripts at the same time in kind of the same scenario. The way I do it, I actually enable and showed Rundeck being able to wrap, here's the script 1 baseline test, and then script 2 baseline test, and script 3 baseline test. And all the individual teams have to agree, hey, everybody, every day at 10 a.m., let's do our baseline test. And so they all put together their profile, self-service, for their own app. This is the kind of baseline test parameters and they schedule it, and everyone agrees we're going to run it at the same time. Now, they're still checking things in dev, and they can run small load tests in dev.
Right.
But if you're in the shared load test environment, which is more like pre-prod, the integrated performance test is nothing more than everyone agreeing, let's all run our JMeter scripts at the same time for that scenario. Then, let's say at noon, we're all going to run a stress test. And then at 2 p.m., we run a scale test. And overnight, we run a soak test. Mm-hmm. you're empowered as a developer, and you could do this through flags on the pipeline, or you could do this manually and get it scheduled and running. And then they have full control to log in and change what. Hey, hey guys, do you do the soak test? Let's say I have a new team. Like we just got our baseline test running, and I tell them you need to feed more test data to do 12 hours. So like,
Right.
we're not quite ready to but when they're ready, they're like, we'll take our baseline test, we'll put our CSV files or data files, whatever we have to do, and then they're like, awesome, now we're starting getting. So if somebody's not getting test results, it's no longer on the separate siloed expert load testing guy named Mark.
Right.
It's a collaborative effort that everyone agrees to kind of come together and use this sort of independent cycling 24/7 continuous work. So that's where the self-service piece comes in from a Rundeck perspective. There's also times when people need to stop all the scheduled stuff and do a triage emergency deep dive.
Right.
So we hit a button, go through all the jobs, and just disable the scheduling, and then we go back into manual mode. Now that's, for me, driven by a Jira ticket.
Okay.
So somebody puts in a load test Jira ticket, and I have to go schedule it, put it on the calendar, etc. What I've done is automated that load test Jira ticket number, the URL or the name of it, is the key in all of the results. So all the jobs, if you have a load test ticket number, it'll store all the results for your test cycle in that folder, and then we parse it, and we actually, after a test is run, we parse all the results and put all the links back in a comment on that Jira ticket.
Right.
So a developer can say, I have a release of X, Y, and Z. I want special load testing. And I haven't done it yet, but you could I might set if they put in a priority P0, P1, I'll automatically stop the scheduled running tests. I'll flash back and clean up the systems, notify everyone, create the Slack channel, and then bring everyone together and say, the load test environment is ready for you to do your deep dive emergency load testing.
Okay.
And we would manually, that's when you would want the human attention to be brought together, but you want it to be continuously running unattended when everyone else out doing the rest of their job. So that concept was that everything I just said in the last 15 minutes, that is the mini version of the session.
So you have the developers, they have all this freedom to check in code, have all this freedom to check in code and actually run at every day at the same time, so on and so forth. How do you avoid the challenge of a different understanding of performance and load profiles and scheduling among all the different groups that can check in code? So you might have one group checking in
different maturity levels.
No think times, no pacing.
I didn't say that I tolerated crappy work.
Well, you may not catch it right away.
Oh, I definitely would. Here's kind of the thing that we were mentioning before, is that if you have even just bad app code, or even a bad script. Now, the scripting practices, my job goes from being the guy who writes the script for you to being the guy that
advises you.
Come and advise. I'm right there for you, man. Let me block 2 days, get right in the rally, sprint schedule, whatever. Somebody says, I have to make changes to my script. Hey, get Mark. Mark's that guy. But I'm not Mark that guy to go do work like Brent in the corner in a silo that no one else can do. I'm here to help them. Hey, here's a few tweaks we can do. We can do such and such. And once it's checked back into the repo, away they go. But the two things that I will say, because when it's running continuously in the background, if the app is screwed up, let's say a dependency is screwed up, like I've got my app 1 and I'm dependent on app 2. Well, app 2 pushes a change that's really crappy. And they look fine in the load test, but for some reason, functional integration, whatever, big red errors in the load testing world. What we had talked about before is if you did a sort of manually facilitated load test project, whatever, we'd be in the lab with that version, and I would run the test, and then I would log a bug and wait for a fix. And so maybe you see the load test failures once. In the continuous model, it will just keep showing red on the big monitors in the dev world, and the PM will eventually get the alerts in their chat. Why is the app 1 load test failing, and pretty soon it comes back to the so it's punishment by visibility of big red errors.
So it might be the dependency issue, but it could be someone wrote bad code and broke the load test.
It could be bad code in the app.
You get 2 bad scripts and they break the whole load test.
Sure, and to be honest with you, there are lots of people in the world who don't know how to write good load testing scripts. We know that.
Yes, that's exactly why I'm asking this question.
Well, that's
So
also part of why, going back, I think we were discussing it should really be more that the load team is coaching the development team early on how to write these tests so that chances are the load team is not going to be
why would a
running the
developer
test.
listen to a tester? They've graduated from that role.
Because the thing you missed before, we share the scripts. So the same script used for unit load testing or unit testing in JMeter is the same script I run.
And if you're a silo developer,
so they
not helping write tests, you're going to be out of my company.
No. This is the thing you said. You must give to receive. So if a developer says, "Hey, I can get small 10-thread unit tests, early load testing," and Mark's going to use the same script, and I'll understand the same results, and if they're the first ones to see it,
and that way I can't complain if the results come back and I don't like them. Because we're
all part of. We're all invested
and that
in
way
the
I
success.
know that the tester is also testing it in ways that it's meant to be operated, but the tester is also going to be providing feedback to say, this is how you want it tested, but this is how it could also be done in different worlds. There's the whole collaboration. Part of the spirit of the whole DevOps thing is testers help developers, help operations, and all these other teams help each other to understand the different roles.
Software engineer across the life cycle.
The seal there.
It is.
So you show up and it's like, look, if we get this...
You're the PayPal seal.
I'm the well, maybe. But
can you bark?
No, don't go there. It scares me.
But
to your point, this is a cultural change from the siloed special team to somebody that works across the life cycle. And in DevOps, it was like, you have a vested interest in starting your performance testing early. Let me give you a JMeter script as an example to get started. Now they're getting some value out of it, and that helps them detect stuff before it's comes down the pipeline. But it's just enough load testing that they get enough value that they're like, oh, I made this change to this web service or made this change. I'll update the script at the same time and check it in. And boom. Then I inherit it.
Right.
I inherit only when I push the app, I push the scripts into the load test environment. I've got the latest, greatest scripts with the latest, greatest code. And it's no longer a throw your thing over the wall and punish the load testing scripting team.
And if you think about, so this is not, I don't think this is an original idea, but we hear it from Bernd, our CTO, all the time, right?
Yeah.
When we did our transformation to Ruxit, when we did our transformation from 6-month waterfall to 2-week release cycles, first thing he said is we have developers in an up-down silo. I'm looking at vertical, right? Vertical silos, all these vertical silos, developer, testers, performance people, operations, business. Take that, turn it on its side, and now you have a parallel track.
You remember that from all the Andy talks,
right?
That was
that is
last
part
year.
of.
To me, that's the seal.
And that's what makes this work.
Yeah.
And that's what makes all this work, because you're sharing all this information with each other. You're co-educating people from different teams. And that, again, when you really go back to what the spirit of DevOps is all about, which is why people like say DevSecOps.
No. Freedom is dangerous. Knowledge is dangerous. This is like cats and dogs living together and sin.
Okay. All right. Well, good luck being in business next year.
Yeah.
But I like the collaborative part. If a developer, I can't expect someone to do something if they're not going to get something out of it.
Right.
And the developers are notorious for, I need you to do this. I need them to do extra work for me, and then they're like, why?
But the developers,
it has value to them.
And the reason
now it's like they'll get something out of it. They'll probably do it.
And the beauty is,
and they're not being hammered over the head like you have to do this from management. They're like, no, I like seeing the telemetry in development. Then I can see it in QA.
And they spend less time working on this stuff.
That helps me make decisions and be a smarter developer and grow. And I mean, they're getting something out of it.
So, Mark, what you're saying is it's all about them, and as long as you can make it all about them.
You got to keep your developers happy.
Then I get less punished downstream in the pipeline, including the ops guys who are like, "Oh, I'm so glad you."
Big fist bumps here.
You know what I mean? Like,
so
do not punish your downstream.
To that point,
friends.
exactly. The developer's going to have to do a little bit of extra work to write this little JMeter script, which is going to be pretty simple for them once they learn how to do it.
Whatever tool.
But what they get out of it is they're not going to be working on something else and have 5 things coming back to them, because they're going to use that early on in their cycle. I mean, this is what we've been talking about for years now. They're going to be testing that the proper way early on in their cycle. Once they pass it out, they know from everything they could have done, it's good code.
We hope.
Well, I mean, there could be
load,
there could be concurrency, there could be other things, but there is enough for them to say at the dev level, this is ready to go to the next phase. And guess what? That's a ton of workload off of them.
It could be a baby
not coming
step.
Back. It's a baby step.
But it's the next step in the flow.
Yeah, but it's not going to be, I'm going to push this out, and then while I'm working on this next crazy thing, those 4 other things that I pushed out
Right.
are all coming back to me. Less likely. It's going to be less likely. So they do have
So
the time
let's
now. When they
call
say,
that
I don't have time to do this, they say, well, no, I do have the time because I know this is going to save me later.
So the blowback rate goes down.
Yes, exactly.
Now, you might translate that to a QA metric or
But they
something.
get the immediate feedback, so it's the defect is addressed closer to point of origin.
Their inception.
Where
It's in their
it's
head.
cheaper.
Cheaper because they'll remember, darn it, stupid me, and we fix the code.
Yeah.
And they didn't also then code 5 things that were dependent on that's already out there.
For someone else.
That doesn't work.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing I wanted to address, because, when you listen to this, is, hey, this sounds great and groovy, man, and it's going to be super easy. But in some cases, one of the challenges, especially for the team maintaining this CI load or performance testing environment, load testing environment, is the environment's going to have to be maintained, right? So data refreshes, maybe some data massaging. I can imagine maybe if you're testing, I remember we had an issue a long time ago where we were testing message boards on our site, right? And it was going to a message, posting a reply. And that message, by the end of, I guess it was probably about 6 months of load testing because this project was so long, was humongous. And then by the end of the testing, we were like, boy, you guys have been breaking this build worse and worse and worse because things are slowing down more and more and more, especially on the message boards. But that's because we have a thread that has like 20 million replies on it, which doesn't
that's
exist.
because you've not returned your data to its same initial
state.
condition.
Right, so all that has to be factored in.
This is the shopping cart with 1 million items in it.
But meanwhile, you also want to make sure your application is growing as it would be growing in production. So you still have these models to consider and take into it. Because if you just set it back to 0 every time, well, maybe performance is going to be great every time.
You need to set it back to a realistic, real-world initial state, hopefully.
Exactly.
I think to James's point, it's still that old throw-it-over-the-wall, disconnected, siloed way of maintaining test assets. And QA people outside of performance have these same issues, right? One of the things I'm thinking is that it used to be punishment was the rule, and you were just elated if a developer or an upstream engineer actually did some extra work to maintain the script. I mean, that was like the exception. Now I think we're flipping it on the ear. And if you have a small pool of experts in the performance team, they have less and less time. They now just become, like you say, advisors or consultants back to those teams saying, by the exception, I'm having to do some heavy lifting to fix an incomplete test design. But I can, as a senior engineer in performance, I can predict, here's a new team that's never done testing before. I'm going to book 1 month of extra cadence to work with them, bring them up to speed. But I have teams that are really capable. They're full stack developers, if you wanted to call them that, mostly full stack. They can, once they pick up my funky JMeter way of doing stuff, they're like, this is great. I know how to do this. We can do this. And then they're like, we still hate JMeter's GUI or JMX file. So can you move us to Locust or move us to another tool? Or if you're in the load runner world, I'm sorry, we don't know C. But take your JMeter.
Java's for failed C developers anyway.
I know. So anyway, I think that's right though. But it flips it opposite. Now the failing, screwed up, bad test scripting becomes the exception, whereby a smaller number of experts can be used to help teams get better at what they're doing. At least that's what I'm experiencing anyway. Well, so that was that's continuous performance. The other thing, the last part I didn't quite get in the session because we ran out of time, because I always run out of time, was how to get started. Of course I talk a lot. The one thing I wanted to share is that you don't have to, like if you draw the 3 circles between dev, performance, and prod,
right,
and you have a flow through there, to get this continuous performance thing happening, don't worry about prod so much. Just get started between dev and test, dev and perf.
It's funny you say this,
because
at the same time you were giving your talk, our friends Abir and Nestor from Citrix, who were on Pure Performance, they were on talking about their transformation.
Oh yeah.
And I told you, I think we said the other day, they're about halfway through, and their part of their transformation has been working with test and dev, getting them all united. And there's another project going on between test and ops, I believe. I'd have to go back to get the particulars. Right. But they started in the one section. They're going to start slowly working on bridging those two all together now, because
they'll have 3 circles.
Yes, but it's about exactly as you're saying. Start with one area. Don't try to do the whole thing at once, because as you're figuring out with the one area, you'll know it's going to work better once you get to, let's say, the prod side, which is a lot more sensitive to this stuff, right? Once you're at prod, you don't want to be doing as much experimentation in practice and technique, and let's see how
Right.
we're going to do this. You can work that out with your dev team
Yeah.
and the test team, and to get that going.
Yeah. And
It was funny because that talk, they were on the same time you were. So it's it's funny. A coincidence. A coinky-dink.
Coinky-dink.
Of course, the question everybody wants to know, in order to go through this transformation, do I have to get tattoos? Do I have to color or shave my head?
Piercings.
Piercings. Yes. Yeah, I'm really not into the piercing
I'm just going to
thing.
encourage the non-permanent hair coloring. That's always a good one.
Yeah.
And see, tattoos and piercings are usually pretty permanent. Piercings can heal. So the tattoos
Sometimes.
are definitely more permanent of the three.
Let's
Yeah.
do it.
So I would just start with hair coloring.
You could do a UV
What about
ink.
a henna tattoo?
What about a
Yeah,
UV?
that
What about a
works.
Yeah,
UV
kinda
ink?
Very
A
temporary.
UV ink tattoo that you can only see when you go into Spencer Gifts by the black light posters.
Yeah, well, unless you own your own blacklight,
Yes, that too.
which
Where you go on those certain
I
rides.
think
have
that
them.
was an episode of CSI based here
there's
in
one
Las
in,
Vegas.
there's one in
a-
CSI.
Okay.
And then it was the Gone in
tattoo
60
that was
Seconds.
done with ultraviolet ink.
I didn't even
Nick
know that
Cage
existed.
movie.
Okay, so do you notice they're packing up the swag booth?
The swag booth. So if you wanted a T-shirt, there's a whole stack of Dynatrace UFOs over there
Yeah,
on sale.
sale.
We're going to give one away.
I wonder if they get cheaper the closer they get to shutting down.
I have no idea.
Probably not because they have a shipping container. That's gonna not a container, but I'm sure that's gonna. You
tell
can
you-
try.
The thing that I want to
Go-
figure
go
out
and-
is
go
is
and make
the
your bid.
mounting the UFO on a stand. I got to figure that out.
Yeah, that was interesting. Maybe it's just resting on top there.
I think it has
a
the
pipe.
stem and it just
Well, I think they were might have
upside
just been resting
down
it,
through the stem.
Yeah.
so it would hold it enough.
No, it was in there. You could shake the thing and it would stay on.
well because it's got the cable.
Right.
But yeah, so what that means
There's
though,
someone who would know.
what this means
No,
though
he
is
doesn't
that
know.
we're over halfway through. This,
We're way
the last
over
day.
halfway
Yeah.
through. There's a last day, and we might do one more broadcast here as we get to the evening thing. But
Yeah.
we might do that portably. We've never done a portable broadcast, have we?
No, I don't think we have.
And I don't think the party's here.
There's
is
going to
it?
be it's going to be
No.
at Brooklyn Bowl. There's going to be bowling and loud music, so it might be challenging. We'll have to see if we can pull it off.
We can pull that off. Anyway, Dynatrace Perform.
Perform,
There'll be some more stories. We might pull some more stories in.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah?
perform 2018.
Perform 2018. What did I say?
You just said perform.
Well, it is. Yes. Perform 2018.
Yes.
Last two things I wanted to
Oh,
say.
no, wait.
Wait.
84 Lumber.
Okay, last one thing I wanted to
First
say.
of all, and you also have not told a cow joke today.
Oh, okay. So I'll tell a cow joke today.
Day 3 cow joke.
Okay, day 3 cow joke today.
I do want to point out that this
Meatloaf.
weekend is, in fact, our Super Bowl 4 performance.
So 84 Lumber.
Lumber, yes.
We're going to have a whole new set of
Although you
failures.
can't use the word
Just-
Super Bowl. You keep
84
getting shut
lumber.
down and sued. But anyhow.
Yes.
So the cow joke. All right.
Day 3 cow joke.
Cow walks into a bar. A lot of cows in bars in my jokes.
Apparently.
And he goes, bartender, let me let's get a glass of milk. The bartender looks at the cow. He's like, you're a cow, aren't you, right? The cow's like, yeah, last time I looked, buddy, I was a cow. It's like, well, you have udders that make milk, right? He's like, yeah. It's like, well, why don't you just get some of your own milk? And the cow goes, oh, geez, I never thought of that. Thank you. So I told you. No one believes me when I tell them the joke's on you with my jokes. And then every time I tell them, they look at me like, I can't believe you just said that. But I told you.
It's a cow joke.
It's a good thing
a
Andrew
good
Dice
cow
Clay is not standing here.
Except,
Or
Because he would steal my material?
No, he would smack
yes,
you.
that's it. Yes, you would be smacked.
Why Andrew Dice Clay of all people?
Yeah. All right.
It's
Anyhow.
Vegas.
So let's
that's right.
let's sign
Let's
off
wrap
for
up.
now, and
Yep.
then come up. We'll come back for the total show wrap up. Maybe another few stories.
All
Does
right.
that sound good?
Thank everyone for listening.
Dun, dun, dun,
Oh,
dun,
why is
dun,
my... I don't think I've been broadcasting again. Stupid connections here. Ba-bum, ba-dum, bum, 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 ba-da.
I'll just download the.
Dun, dun, dun.